Welcome. My name is Paige, and I am with Deschutes Public Library, and you are here tonight to hear from Anis Mojgani, our Oregon Poet Laureate. Anis Mojgani was appointed by Governor Kate Brown as part of the Poet Laureate program. The Poet Laureate program is a collaborative project of the state's 5 cultural partners: the Oregon Arts Commission, Oregon Humanities, Oregon Heritage Commission, Oregon Historical Society, and State Historic Preservation Office, with funding from the Oregon Cultural Trust. A 2-time individual champion of the National Poetry Slam and winner of the International World Cup Poetry Slam, Anis has been awarded residencies from the Vermont Studio Center, Air Serenity, the Bloedel Nature Reserve, the Sou'wester, and the Oregon Literary Arts Writers in the Schools program. Author of 5 books of poetry, he has done commissioned work for the Getty Museum and the Peabody Essex Museum, and has given multiple TEDx talks. April 2021 will see the premiere of his first opera libretto, Sanctuaries. Anis's work has appeared on HBO, National Public Radio, and as part of the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day series, and in the pages of such journals as Rattle, Platypus, Winter Tangerine, Forklift, Ohio, and Bat City Review. Known for his performances and well regarded for them the world over, Anis has performed at hundreds of universities across the United States, festivals around the globe such as the Sydney Writers Festival, Jamaica's Calabash Festival, and Seoul's Young Writers Festival, and for audiences as varied as the United Nations and the House of Blues. Originally from New Orleans, Anis currently lives in Portland, Oregon. So please join me in welcoming Anis Mojgani.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Paige, for having me, for welcoming me. Suddenly popped up. Woohoo! I love you, Anis. Well, whoever you are, I love you as well. It's so very strange to be alive right now, just in general. As Paige mentioned, I live in Portland, Oregon. And so I'm coming to you from there, and it is very strange days here. Outside I'm in my bedroom this evening, in the topmost peak of the house I live in, and outside it is very smoky, and all day it has been lit as if it's lit on a studio set. I feel as if I'm living on a television set, and if I go outside it'll just be like, I don't know, gaffers walking around or something. I don't know who's out there tonight, but thank you for joining, and I'm going to share some poems. Some of them I know what I'm going to do, and some of them I don't, because like I said, these are strange days we're living in, and nothing pans out over the course of the 24 hours that one seems to expect to happen, but we'll get there. Yeah. Come closer. Come into this. Come closer. You are quite the beauty. If no one has ever told you that before, know that right now. You are quite the beauty. There is joy in how your mouth dances with your teeth. Your smile is simply a sign of how sacred your life actually is, so step into it. Come closer. Know that whatever God might be, they ask the world around them to help them make something of worth. Woke from dreaming, scraped the soil from spaces stuck somewhere inside themselves, made you, and were happy. You make that Lord happy. Come into this. Come closer. Know that something softer than us, but just as wholly planted pieces of itself into our feet that we might one day dance our way back. Know that you are almost home. Come just a little bit closer. There are birds beating their wings beneath your breastplates, gentle sparrows that ache to sing. Come aching hearts, come soldiers of joy, doormen of truth. Know that my heart was too big for my body, so I let it go. And most days this world thins me to where I'm just another cloud, forgetting another flock of swans, having shaved off so many of my corners that I have felt at home only in the shape of a ball, bending myself so far backwards that the song of my mother believed I was returning home. But believe me when I tell you that somehow my soul still manages to squeeze itself into very narrow spaces. Place your hand beneath your head when you sleep tonight. Perhaps you will find it there, making beauty as we sleep, making beauty as we dream, making beauty as we turn over. When we turn over in the ground, may the ghosts that we have asked our answers of do that turning, kneading us into crumbs of light and into this love thing called life. Come into it, come, you wooden museums, gentle tigers, little giants. I see teacups upside down, glowing across your grins. Your hearts are like my hands. Some days, all they do is tremble. I am like you. I am just like you. I too at times am filled with so much fear, but like a hallway must find the strength to walk through it. Walk through this with me, through this church of blood, bone, and muscle that is ours. There is a doorknob that glows like chance before you. Grab it, turn, and pull. Step through, back straight, chin up, eyes open, hearts loud. Walk through this with me. Walk through this with me. It's so very strange to make the shift to this type of artistic engagement with audiences. I haven't yet figured out what the shape of that is for me. One of the things that I love about the work that I do is having the opportunity to say poems aloud, which I love. I think that the poem asks the reader to say it aloud. And so having the opportunity to do that, but that also being able to have the opportunity to say that to and with people, with an audience, that even though there may be this poem that I've created, this thing, this object, putting it into a live space becomes it becomes something else then, and it becomes something built by both myself and whoever's in that space with me, listening and engaging, and it becomes interactive. And so to sit just staring at my face on the computer, knowing that there's like folks out there. I haven't yet figured out what my artistic relationship to the work and to the show is in this new space. And so I'm curious as to what the days and the weeks and the months, and hopefully not the years, will communicate to me with regards to that. I did this show prior to this one. I think most of the Zoom shows that I'd done, they had boxes on the screen, so that I was able to see the audience. And there's been a couple like this one where it's just me, and there's something kind of like interesting, I think, about that, of like, oh, well, perhaps that just, relates me more to the work, that it's just me barking into the void. But I haven't yet felt comfortable with that yet. Hence, so much just kind of like random awkward banter. But of course, there's also plenty of random awkward banter in my live shows as well. So that's no difference. I just don't get to see people's faces, groans, or hear their laughs. Yeah, enough of that. We'll get into some poems. The fisherman throws his nets. At night when he eats, he sits alone, his plate round as the moon. He lights one candle on the table and peels the skin of his fish with his fork and knife, peeling it back like a bed sheet. Most days he wakes before the sun. For the fish, they do not sleep long. And sometimes when he has been drinking heavily, he goes down to the rocks at night and he reads to the fish. He reads to them poems from books, poems about the human condition, poems about the muscles inside of him that question and quiver and shiver and sleep, bottle in one hand, book in the other. Books clutching poems like they were their mothers, too afraid to let their children out into the soft fear of the electric night, and he was the wild one to show them this world. His mother will never hold him like that again, he thinks. I am too big. book in one hand, bottle in the other. He reads the poems out loud, spitting the words out like they were teeth he no longer needed, while the storms gather around him like a flock of ballooning corpses. He screams the poems like a drunk preacher cutting a rope. He slurs the screams, picking up poems like stones, hurling them at the foot of God's throne, hurling word after word after word, waiting for some door in some black cloud to open up, but nothing happens. The rain falls. The waves swing. The fish sleep and awake and sleep and awake again and again. In the rocking of the ocean, he stands above them like Noah, surrounded by bucket after overflowing bucket, and all he has left to catch this wet lightning is this open mouth. So he reads to them. He reads to them poem about things none of them will ever see, about flowers opening, above birds large as cliffs, holding heroes between their silver wings, carrying these warriors into the open grace of the gods and into a mighty providence that this fisherman stands inside of, their shields and shoulders polished hard enough to blind the sun right back. He empties himself, and the waves, they swing. He goes home, falls into bed, sleeps all the next day. Night comes through his window like a fever, like a dream, like a mother holding him close. He wakes wet inside her arms, goes to his kitchen, lights his candle, cooks his audience, and peels back its skin like a bedsheet before crawling inside. Thank you. Hey, for those of you tuning in from around the globe, and not here in Portland, and not here in Oregon, I don't know. I was going to tell you about the fire and the fires, and how I don't know. It's just like a really kind of scary, strange, surreal time right now. I know here and I know elsewhere as well. But yeah, it's just so bananas to have spent the last few days like smelling all that is burning coming in from elsewhere, and unsure as to whether or not it'll reach to where I live and my immediate friends live, and also being worried for the places that it has already reached. And it's such a, I think I bring it up, well, partially just because like it weighs heavily on my thoughts the last few days, but also, I think that there's aspects of it that, just like so much of what's happening with us around the world right now and what's happening particularly in our country, that, I think humans are very often, at least in this country, like humans, Americans, I can't speak for how other folks interact, but I think like in America, we're very used to having someone to speak our grievances to, that there is a point of entry for whose fault it is for the thing that plagues us. And that happens on small levels, like, oh, my steak is burnt, I gotta talk to the manager, like I'm entitled to talk to the manager. And there's some things that I think are completely warranted, but I think that there's also many things in our country that reward us for pitting ourselves against another person, for finding, giving the blame to a person or a group of people. And I think that that's why this time right now is particularly really, really hard, because there, definitely, I think that there are many things for which one can find fault with individuals and groups of people. I mean, like I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole, but like our government is a shit show, and like just across the board, it doesn't know what it's doing. But I think that like there's this aspect of like, we don't know what to do when, say, like a forest is burning, and like how do we mourn that? How do we like channel our anger? And so like there's many things that I think we start directing towards people. And I guess I mentioned this just like to have the opportunity to like ask myself and ask all of us or anyone that's listening to like hold true to the space that of which like some things happen in this life that are no person's fault, and some things happen in this life that we have to accept and weather those things, and as opposed to like digging up the blame at certain points, find the ways in which we are simply like showing up for one another. There's, you know, one of the, I'll get into poems shortly. I just want to say one thing right quick. You know, like in regards to that, like, you know, one of the things that's really beautiful about being here in Portland right now is that there's a lot of like distress, and there's a lot of things. I'll collect my thoughts and I'll come back to that. I'm going to read a poem right now, and I'll come back to like things about Portland, because Portland, I think, is on many people's minds, and some of it is information that is legit, and some of it is information that is misguided, and some of it that is really beautiful about what is happening here right now is floating under the larger radar. So I'm going to read a couple poems and then maybe talk about the city that I live in a state that I love. High five me with your, oh, so the name of this poem is Today's Love is Brought to You by the Letter John Sands. And I mentioned the title because John Sands is a poet, who's a friend of mine and a poet that I love. And any chance to like share with folks poets that they might not be aware of, I'd love to introduce them to those poets. And John is a poet who, when I hear his poems, he makes me feel like that there's some sort of gold superpower in me, this golden light that would allow me to pay my rent with a brand new dance move, you know? And when I wrote this poem, there was something about it that felt like it was written under the shade of a John Sands tree. And so it is called Today's Love is Brought to You by the Letter John Sands. High five me with your heart. High thousand me with your hearts. I know you have many of them. We all love many things. I love biscuits. I love little pancakes. I love cheeseburgers. I've loved more than just things that I chew with my mouth. I did love my wife. Sometimes I would chew my wife's shoulder in my mouth. Sometimes my wife, she was annoyed by this. But still, sometimes my wife did love me back. Some things that I have loved will never love me back. Random racist upon the street. While your rhetoric may anger me, I still have love for you, though you probably will not love me back. Walrus, I love you. Though were I to be around you, you would probably gore me with your tusks. Perhaps this is not a good example, as the wild unknowing of wild creatures is not necessarily the same as not loving something back. Perhaps also because I actually do not love the walrus, but simply mention him here because there's a small figurine of a walrus on the coffee table as I write this poem. However, I do love the elephant. I love the elephant. However, he too would probably gore me with his tusks. Again, not out of unlove, but perhaps fear. I do not love fear, but I respect him, and that he loves me. Testing how well I carry the sword of my intent to the land of the midnight farm. The land of the midnight farm, it is a strange and scary place. There are perhaps serial killers and or possums lurking in its darkness. The serial killer may love me, but in no way that I wish to be loved. Their love may involve the removal of my skin and the wearing of it out to the club. The possum may love me, but I do not love the possum. In fact, I hate the possum solely because of how ugly I find the possum to be. And yes, I realize that this is a shallow reason to dislike something, so I'm trying, possum. I'm trying to not love you so much. Instead, possibly just be ambivalent to your existence. But oh, I want to hate you like I hate the thought of bee stings, of beans, of black people. I put black people in there just to see if y'all were paying attention. I love black people. I love white people. Though sometimes I find both of them to be trifling. Don't get me wrong. The only mother that I've ever had is black. The only wife that I ever had was white. Damn, if we humans are a trifling animal at times, but still, I love you, you mountains of trifle and futility, of perseverance and lightness, of incessant rowing towards the sun, even while facing it, wondering why there is no forward momentum. Turn around. Look at my many hands holding up my many hearts and a many high five salutation to you, Nina Simone, Paul Newman. So many things in this world that I have loved. Rising with the sun, sleeping in late. Little pancakes. And even though they didn't turn around once when she got gone, my wife's shoulders. Thank you. It's yeah, like, you know, Portland is very, very strange right now. There's been protests for more than 100 days and nights, and you know, it's one of those things that feels very, very frustrating, because it's regardless of whether a person agrees with an individual's like choice of tactics, so to speak, everything that's happening is simply happening because there is oppression in this country on certain groups of people. And that oppression has always been there in different forms. And there is a group of people that is saying, this doesn't jive anymore. And we won't have it. And, you know, so it's like, it's so strange to, you know, witness people processing their grief and their sorrow and their want for equality, equity, liberation, and to see the responses to that from the state and the responses to that from the powers that be. And particularly here in Portland, where so much of it is rooted in police brutality on Black and brown humans, to have the powers that be allow the police to answer that with more brutality is such a very strange disconnect. And there was the thing that I'm trying to remember what the thing was that I wanted to say to earlier when I was like starting to talk about this, and it slipped out of my head, but perhaps it will return in a little bit. So I'm going to share some more poems with y'all at the moment. And yeah. What it's so strange to do. One of the strange things about doing poems in Zoom is like, and I don't know if there's like a way to like turn it off or not, like to be notified of chats. Like I love that there's like this level of engagement. Like that's a wonderful thing. But then sometimes like, you know, and not just in shows, but just like in general, like say maybe you're in a meeting or whatever, and then there's just kind of like this red number that keeps popping up in the center of the screen. And I don't know if there's some way to be like, yo, I don't need that notification. I could just like look at the comments. Yeah, anyway. Oh, yeah, there's a comment here. Somebody says whether it's fires or police brutality, we need to take care of our neighbors. And that's the thing that I wanted to bring up about here in Portland, that has been like really magnificent. And that like the ways in which the people in this city have shown their humanity, shown their love, shown their community for just showing up. And not just simply with regards to like showing up at a protest and subjugating themselves to like literal physical harm from unaccountable police officers every night for the last 3.5 months. but also that like there's, you know, of course, like that's what the cameras are on, but like the wealth of things that are happening away from that. You know, I mean, I just re-Instagrammed like a map for like free fridges scattered around through Portland that are stocked by folks that are just there for people to come up and take food and water if they need such. The amount of like things that come across my feed of individuals and organizations like sharing and voicing this person being evicted and needing money, or folks showing up to support them against being thrown out of their home during a pandemic. The ways in which like folks have just shown up really shows how possible and how feasible a world, a society that's rooted in how we help one another and how we engage with one another and how we support one another is like so ridiculously possible and feasible. And you know, like it's mind-boggling to me that the city and the cities don't catch up to that fact. You know, like we're already showing what is possible when we're all under like the unbelievable amount of duress. You know, like how are the ways that we could show up if we weren't in a pandemic, if like we weren't trying to dismantle, you know, like centuries old structures of white supremacy, if we weren't right now like in Oregon dealing with towns being burnt to a crisp, you know, like, so it's like, what if things were just kind of like old school normal, you know, and like the blossoming that could feasibly happen in cities like all across this nation is you know, both infuriating that it's not happening and also so hoping of what is doable and what is possible. So yeah, got some more poems for y'all. What was the poem I was going to share? Is it in this book? No, it's in this book. This is called, actually, no, I don't want to share that one. I want to share this one. For any tender ears out there, sorry, sometimes I cuss. And sometimes I cuss in my poems. But you know, that's life. And like, as someone who gets paid to deal with words, I'm a big believer in like, I choose the right word for the thing that I want to say. And that there are no wrong words. Just how you use them. Maybe there's a couple wrong words. Ones that are rooted in hate. It's called Here Am I. We all wanted that high school sweetheart. Wanting to be young in the 50s with meatloafs and sock hops and lawns so perfect they looked like Clark Gable was kissing them. Wanting to be 13 and alive and meet someone that was 13 alive and walk with them past the grandstands, to sit on their hands with, to sit and talk with, to sit and kiss with, to sit and sit with, like it was something that you had missed, but that never was. We once climbed into bed as though between the sheets was a valley where dinosaurs still breathed. And how we might explore them with a flashlight, catching these triceratops and brontosauruses, but even he was opened up with the dripping teeth of reality. With the smoke that rose out of the homes on the corners that we once climbed through, the streets and the footballs with which we once threw, the school desks upon which we once drew, the windows that sat open through which we once flew, before the outside world of parking spaces and dead friends came flooding on in, and we forgot what we wanted and became what we become. Waitresses and bartenders, city employees in temp positions, we are junkies and one-kiss poems, and we cry the stars. As we write our scars onto dumpsters and electric boxes, because the only thing that we can hear is our hearts, and the only ones listening are the streets, to the blood that breathes, to the letters we leave, and we dream to rise ourselves up out of these burning buildings, but instead we get buried somewhere beneath, because I know my life is like some high school kid's notebook. That kid that shuffles back and forth between school and home, stacking the letters and the pictures too close for anyone outside of his own imagination to read, because it's through the ink that his heart beats, that his heart breathes, And we all just wanted to write these notes. Check if you like me. Check if you don't. Check if you'll date me. Check if you won't, because we all wanted the love songs to be true. And we all did love dinosaurs once. And we all wanted the stars to hold our hands, to lick the teeth, to fuck us. But they ended up fucking us. So let your smiles twist. Like my heart dancing precariously on the edge of my fingertips, staining them like that same high school kid licking his thoughts using his Sharpie tip, writing, I was here. I was here, motherfucker. And ain't none of y'all can write that in the spot that I just wrote it in. I'm here, motherfucker. And we all here, motherfucker. And we all motherfuckers, motherfucker, because every breath I breathe brings me a second closer to the day that my mother may die. And every breath I take takes me a second further from the moment she caught my father's eye. And every word I carry is another stone I carry to put into place in the foundation that I'm building to ease the days and erase something that I never saw. What all of us wanted, what none of us got, what we all had and have, when we all forgot that we all wanted to be something, that we all became something. And it might not be the mess we thought it'd be when we were kids, but something is still something. And like some cats say, something's better than nothing. Feet are smarter than an engine, and dreams are stronger than thighs, and questions are the only answers we need to have to know that we are as alive as the time when I held the mind of a child asking, why is 2 + 3 always equal to 5? Where do people go to when they die? What made the beauty of the moon and the beauty of the sea? Did that beauty make you? Did that beauty make me? Will it make me something? Will I be something? Am I something? The answer comes, you already are. You always were. And you still have time to be. Excuse me. So I think I'll read a few more poems, and then we'll do Q&A, and then maybe I'll do like one more poem to close out the whole session. So it's been very interesting. I don't know, being appointed to this role, to this position of Oregon Poet Laureate. I came to Oregon originally in 2004, and growing up in Louisiana, like I can't remember what my geography lessons were as a child. You know, like I'm sure I learned the states, but had no comprehension of basically anything on the West Coast. So to have arrived here and made it my home has been a really interesting and beautiful thing, and special for me. And so to then receive an appointment like this was such a sweetness, such an honor, to, you know, be tasked with carrying the state that I live in inside of me, in maybe not necessarily a different way than I had before, but maybe a more so way. And it's been interesting and challenging, definitely, to try to find what are the ways that I do that, and what are the things to put into motion during this time when I cannot, say, travel to Bend, Oregon. I cannot travel to see people and cities around this state. So it's been interesting to kind of like push my creativity to see what I can do. And so many of those things are like in the works, you know, they won't pop up just yet. So it's really nice to get to be able to like sit here and share with folks in this manner while I'm working on those other things. This is, I was going to share this poem, but instead, since I was just talking about Oregon, I will share this poem about Oregon many moons ago, called Along the Sandy. There were 2 trips we made together to the river. The first one with everyone else, you in your new second-hand swimsuit that fit loosely, Aaron through mud on your back. On the following trip, I swallowed water offshore. I thought I would drown, and you tried to help me. No matter the weight of the day or the lightness of the night, My body holds these trips, along with the crest of the Northwest, the mountains of its giants and its trees. The life it gave me is carried by my body. I am thankful for how the dark hands of Oregon held us, that the bees in my chest finally slept soundly. That fruit grew. That fruit was picked by us from both our bodies, held up in the sunlight, turned over in our hands with wonder, and then shared with each other. This fruit was shared. The juice from it is not a stain, just something that fell. We put our hands over our eyes to keep from going blind, put the china of our limbs into the current, porcelain, smooth, curving. What plates we polished off. The ones you left me with are very pretty. Such golden light the rivers in my country hold. They speak well of you. And I will bookend that one with a poem about growing up down south in New Orleans, which is where I'm originally from. And it's called 4 Stars. There was a wasp nest on the back porch. It looked like dead honeycomb. Outside was a hornet's hive. I stuck my hand out there. The sun buzzed loudly. Nothing could bite me. A caterpillar did. I'd climbed its tree. It kissed me with its back. Its hair was sharp enough to leave 4 stars spinning in my palm. The world spun through my arms and crashed onto our street, so I picked it up. At the back of the backyard was a tin shed falling apart. Inside it, I swear there was a giant sleeping. I woke him, told him my dreams, and led him humming back into our yellow kitchen. The counters were always covered in topsoil. My mother, she loved to garden and to collect marbles inside of mason jars. We were never allowed to touch them. I loved the smell of the air conditioner. There was a window unit in the dining room and another in my parents' bedroom. Putting my face in front of its vents made me feel like Sunday. I could bike the whole square of the block in 3 minutes flat. My friends Jalal, Putt, and Rue, they lived around the corner from us. There was a tree in front of their house, too big to be a birch. My friend Semendar, he lived 2 fence hops away. His mother showed mine what God looked like. God, he smelled like my father. Both their beards were black bears. Me and Mom, we went fishing in the park. I caught 2 catfish and waited for them to die. They swam in circles inside of our refrigerator because no one had ever taught me how to kill anything. In Mississippi, we ate every single perch that I caught. The grasshoppers there, they're the size of an almond joy. My sister, she had a pet rat. Part of his ear was gone. His name was Pierre. I named my pet mouse after a favorite book, Charlotte's Web. She is buried under a white rock in the backyard. The day our dog died, Pops found him hanging from the clothesline. I cried into my pillow. I was 10 years old. I could fit under the house. My knees didn't care. Neither did the dark. After the tub, the hallway from the bathroom to mine was a dark tunnel, breathing only to swallow me whole. I shivered and was more afraid of that walk than anything ever since. Even now, there are moments where it still shakes me, but there were times when the night sat beside me on my bed quietly, like it was a big man who had to do what I told him to do. He was too dumb or he loved me too much. Either way, he had the same smile. I had never been stung by a bee before. Not my whole life. Not my whole life. Thank you. So I'm going to share, I think, 3 more poems, and then we'll see about some questions. I wrote this. This is a new poem that I wrote last week after I couldn't sleep, and I had, where is it? I was up late and I read a poem from my laureate predecessor, Kim Stafford, a poem that he had posted that spoke about 2 owls speaking to one another. And I pinned the sentence, 2 birds calling across the river, and a poem fell out. And I was debating whether or not to share it tonight, just because I also recorded it for, on Saturday, is the Governor's Arts Awards, in which the Governor of Oregon, Kate Brown, will be awarding, I think there's 4 awards that she's giving out to artists around the state. And so I recorded this poem, and so I was like, oh, well, let's take out some of the sales from my performance on Saturday. But we're all sitting here in this room, so I'll just share it with y'all, and then a couple more. 2 birds calling across the river in the night to each other, or both on the same side, and still calling to another caller upon the river's farther side. And in calling, do the birds call to the same absent feathered caller, or each to their own, each waiting for their own caller's song to call in response and become known? Or do they call out to nothing, with both birds in their darkness waiting in the trees of one riverbank for the call of a winged nothing to carry over and find them, with the nothing's gentle mouth made known now by the sound it holds? Both birds waiting, or hoping, or neither, just maybe listening to how the dark holds the song of themselves when no longer held in the dark of their own body. So much we make outside our bodies to hear the within, to throw the untouchable upon a something to be known. The shape of a wind made known by what it moves through, what its movement is made against. Field grass, a flag rippling, the curving of a sea's wave, a stone wall tumbling over, a dance, that which is unseen in us. This too is how we come to know what it is. The painting is not the picture, but the stroke. The song is the notes, not the instrument lifting them. The light defines itself by how it exits the dark, but upon exiting, it can only cease to be. When a something burns, the something is not the thing burning, nor even is the burning that which burns, but rather that what sets it aflame, and not match nor lighter, neither Molotov nor kerosene, not hand striking, but rather the thing under the hand, under the match, under the striking. The thing burning is the want for warmth, the warmth of being heard, of being seen, of being touched, of being known. Even as of the star, the body of it long since gone now, its light exited to carry itself to this side of the dark that holds our seasons and us spinning beneath them. The 2 birds are not the birds, but vessel held by branch and night, that they might make known a song in a darkness, carried from one side over the threshold, and then might be carried further over the next, that which sits inside the vessel of another might hear what the hearts of others have wrought, have sung. Listen to what we have brought, to what we are singing. Listen, what do you want to have wrought in return? What do you want to have sung? What do you wish to have given? What do you wish to sing? So I'm going to share one more poem and do question and answer, and then see about a poem after that. This is for the fat girls. This is for the little brothers. This is for the schoolyard wimps and for the childhood bullies who tormented them. For the former prom queen and for the milk crate ball players, for the nighttime cereal eaters and for the retired elderly Walmart store front door greeters. Shake the dust. This is for the benches and the people sitting upon them. For the bus drivers driving a million broken hymns, for the men who have to hold down 3 jobs simply to hold up their children, for the nighttime schoolers, and for the midnight bike riders trying to fly. Shake the dust. For the 2-year-olds who cannot be understood because they speak half English and half God, shake the dust. For the boys with the beautiful sisters, shake the dust. For the girls with the brothers who are going crazy, for those gym class wallflowers, the 12-year-olds afraid of taking public showers, for the kid who's always late to class because they forget the combination to their locker, for the girl who loves somebody else, shake the dust. This is for the hard men who want love, but know that it won't come. For the ones who are forgotten, the ones the amendments do not stand up for the ones who are told, speak only when you are spoken to, and then are never spoken to. Speak every time you stand, so you do not forget yourself. Do not forget yourself. Do not let one moment go by that doesn't remind you that your hearts beat thousands of times every single day, and that there are enough gallons of blood to make every one of you oceans. Do not settle for letting those waves settle and for the dust to collect in your veins. This is for the celibate pedophile who keeps on struggling, for the poetry teachers, and for the people who go on vacations alone, for the sweat that drips off a Mick Jagger singing lips, and for the shaking skirt on Tina Turner's shaking hips, for the heavens and for the hells through which Tina has lived. This is for the tired and for the dreamers, for those families that will never be like the Cleavers, with perfectly made dinners and sons like Wally and the Beaver. This is for the bigots, for the sexists, for the killers, for the big house jail sentenced cats becoming redeemers, and for the springtime that always seems to know to show up after every one of our winters. This is for you. Make sure that by the time the fisherman returns, you are gone. Because just like the days, I burn at both ends, and every time I write, every time I open my eyes, I'm cutting out parts of myself just to give them to you. So shake the dust and take me with you when you do, for none of this has ever been for me. All that pushes and pulls and pushes and pulls, it pushes for you. So grab this world by its clothespins and shake it out again and again and jump on top and take it for a spin. And when you hop off, shake it again, for this is yours. Make my words worth something. Make this more than just another poem that I write. More than just another poem, like just another night that sits heavy above every one of us. Walk into it, breathe it in, let it crash through the halls of your arms, like the millions of years of millions of poets coursing like blood, pumping and pushing, making you live, shaking the dust. So when the world knocks at your front door, you clutch the knob tightly, but you open on up and you run forward as far as you must, as fast as you can, into its widespread greeting arms, with your hands outstretched before you, fingertips trembling though they may be. Thank you. I'm feel that there's probably some questions out there. I know that stuff's popped up in the chat and in the Q&A. I guess we'll start fielding some of those.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain that as soon as you opened your mouth and said the words "shake the dust," there was just a cry that was felt through the universe on the back end of Zoom of everyone saying, "I'm so excited." Or maybe that was just me, but you probably felt it. We're not that far away. There was just this, I can't believe he's doing this one. So thank you, Anise. That was beautiful. We knew that, but also it's amazing how bodily all of your work is. We should expect that from a spoken word poet, but you even managed to transmit it via Zoom. So not easy to do. All right, we have a few questions here. We'll just dive right in. How do you know when a poem is finished?
You know, I mean, it works differently for different poems. You know, that sometimes, I mean, definitely I think like the longer a poem remains in my care, the more it's subjugated to changing, because you know, perhaps I'll write something and I think it's finished or it is finished, and then I start rooting around through my stuff, say for a book or to published or maybe to perform, and you know, maybe that poem that I thought was finished speaks to me, and then it sometimes changes. It might change because time away from it has allowed me to look at it with a different sort of clarity. And in other situations, sometimes time away from it, I then just, based on the person that I am in that moment, want to use it to create essentially a different poem. And so it evolves that manner. Sometimes a poem just stops, you know, and it happens to be like when it stops, sometimes like it stops and it did its job and it's not necessarily a poem so much as just sort of like poetry from inside of me. And sometimes it stops and it's like, oh, this is a poem. My journey with it is done, and it is like self-formed, you know, like a cup, you know. But like the cognizant aspect of it, I think, like, you know, when something in my consciousness in a moment feels like a poem is finished, you know, the it's sometimes like hard to put into words, I think, simply because it sounds like so like froofy, you know, but it's like the poem tells me that it's done, you know. And like, you know, I think that definitely like poems that haven't spoken and said, we're finished, you finished us, are still poems that sometimes find their way out into the world, find their way into journals, find their way into books, find their way into audiences. That one doesn't have to have that for it to like enter into the world. But I think the poem knows when it's finished, or that when it has finished being carried by you. And some of those things are very tangible, like, you know, it feels balanced. It has a narrative arc that has carried its journey to its plot finish, you know. And other times it's just, you know, like, yeah, you know, it's like, here's the poem. Like, oh, it did what it's supposed to do. Hold water, you know, and I can set it down and move on to the next one. So hopefully something in that rang true for you.
How about writing songs? Have you ever tried to write a song? Have you considered it? And have you ever considered alternately setting a poem to music?
Yes and yes. So I do on occasion write songs. Write feels like a weird term to me because it's like I have times, at times I have challenges self-describing myself as a musician, because I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel in tune with what like my personal, I think, bar for myself of when I would consider myself a musician, which is to have like comprehensive knowledge of an instrument that I'm able to say like repeat play a song. And the music that I make is usually based on whatever stumbling through the dark I'm doing at any given time, and creating sounds, creating melodies, playing them, and putting them together. And very often those songs are built out of, I need a placeholder for the words, and I dive into the words that have already been written. And they start out as placeholders, but I don't even know if lazy is the word, but like the music is very often music that I'm not seeking to hand over to others. And so there's an element of it not being like retuned and refined with those lyrics. And you know, definitely there are songs that I've written that are just straight song lyrics, you know, that sit in my computer largely. Sometimes they make their way into being actual songs that I'll sing. And over the years, you know, like some of the music that I make is music that I then will put poems of some sort over. And sometimes in shows and on tour, I've incorporated music from others into performances. So yeah.
Yeah, and in that same vein, you've had a collaboration with one of the poems that everyone was so excited to hear tonight, Matt Kearney. You worked with him. How did that come about? You Shake the Dust is featured in Matt Kearney's song.
So Matt and I first met via this organization called To Write Love on Our Arms, which is an organization that I've done work with over the years that centers on suicide and self-harm awareness, abuse. And today, by the way, is World Suicide Prevention Day. I meant to speak to it earlier. You know, so particularly in these times, you know, I think it's, you know, immensely, it sounds so stupid to say immensely important. Like it sounds as if it's just like, you know, checking off the list of like, doing your due diligence of like voicing the cause, but you know, people are hurting very, very badly right now, you know, in varying degrees. You know, essentially like our planet is in a place of mourning, you know, what once was, you know, and it won't be what it once was. You know, that old world, whatever new shape our normal world, so to speak, will take, will not be what it once was. And, you know, we are in a state of mourning, and like we're not able to process it because there's so much going on. And so a lot of people are hurting. So, you know, and so I bring that, I have that tangent just because I, you know, if you are hurting, you know who you can go to. And if you're not hurting as bad, know who you can go to and go to them to make sure that they have someone. Anyway, you know, like, so Matt and I met a number of years ago doing an event with Right Love in Our Arms. And so we became friends. And when I was on tour at some point, I'd passed through Nashville where he lives, and he's like, hey, I don't know what this is, but like I had set some music to like to Shake the Dust, this recording I had of it, and I was wondering what you thought, you know, if that was all right. And I was like, yeah, run with it, you know. And so he wrote this song, and then he wanted to put it on his album. He's like, hey, can I use this clip? And I was like, yeah, totally. And so that's how it happened.
That's really incredible. If anyone hasn't heard it, you must immediately. After we're done here, don't leave yet. Go to YouTube, find it. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. Speaking of Shake the Still, because you know we love to dive into that poem. How long did that one take you to write?
You know, I can't speak to that honestly. Like, because I wrote it 20-something years ago. And like, you know, there's also an aspect of like, you know, as I was saying before about when poems are finished, like I think definitely like when poems, for me, my relationship to poems that I perform, like over the years, the more that I perform something, it starts like fitting itself in a different way. And some sentences get changed, and some sentences get dropped, and some sentences get added. You know, even just reading it right now, I was like, oh, I'm not done. There's something I need to change here, you know? So I don't know how long it took. I have a vague memory that, you know, there was definitely like a chunk at the start, I think, that sort of like came out. But, you know, it's, yeah, I wrote that poem, yeah, 20 years ago and some change. So it was a long time ago.
Yeah, it seems like experiencing your work here, you know, I've read so much of your work, and then you're saying the poem to me now and to all of us now, and it is a different experience. And our audience knows the same thing. We have someone here who said, I've seen you perform in person and you seem to use your whole body when you declaim them. How is it reciting them while sitting at a desk? Have you tried Zooming where the camera captures your whole body? Because you are a spoken word poet. You use every part of yourself. So how is this format here different?
As a side note, hello, Mary Allen, the person who asked that question, an old family friend. Happy that you're joining us. I mean, doing it in Zoom it's something like, I think, strange and different, and it just breeds a different energy in the relationship that I have to the poem. And, you know, I'm appreciative of like exploring what that is. You know, I think any time that I read a poem, it's an opportunity for me to learn something new about the poem, to learn something new about myself, to find out whether it stands a different way in a different situation. I have been wanting to, you know, I mean, like, I would love to set up like a space in either our house's garage or maybe even like another place that essentially was like a Zoom theater, you know, and being able to just like, whether it was live or whether it was recorded or both, but being able to sort of like create a mini theatrical experience that was me doing just a show to no one that people were able to witness, and it being in the body, you know, that like because one of the things that I do like about performing live is that like, I'm a big believer in, my philosophy in life is that like we as humans are navigated by our head, our heart, and our body. And my head takes the reins far too often for my liking. And so like the beauty of having the chance to do the work that I do, one of the beauties of it is that like it allows me to like give more time and space to my body and let my body respond to something. And so like, you know, I would love to see like what is the exploration of like what happens in a space that I am in with no one else. What happens to my body with the relationship to the poem. So it is something that I would like to, you know, explore.
Even your voice sounds different when you're speaking conversationally versus reading a poem. And how is that cultivated or instinctual?
I think it's a mix, you know, like, because it also just sort of like depends, I think, on the poem. Many years ago, I found myself feeling like there was a disconnect between my performance. Like, I don't even like using that word at this juncture, but like my performance and the intent of the poems. Like, I felt like I was seeking to write poems that were sincere and really trying to give a person in an audience something of myself, and hopefully then something of their self. And the performance felt as if like it was fine, but it felt performative. It felt theatrical. And so it felt, as I've said often to folks, that like as if I had, say, like done a wood carving and then like put it in a box that was just like gilded and ornate to give over as a gift. And so like I really wanted to find the ways in which I was stripping away that performance coat, and you know, worked at doing that. And so like, you know, I feel like there's many poems that I do that you know, I think there's always going to be a slight heightened edge, just because there will just innately be a theatricality that lends itself to being the person speaking a thing in a room, you know? And but like really seeking to have it feel as if like whatever it is that I'm saying to a room is exactly what I would say to them if I was saying to a person in a conversation. But one, there are some poems that, because I've done them for so long, and they are poems that are originally rooted in a more performative space, that some aspects of them stay, and that's who and what they are. But two, the thing that, and how it connects to my process is that like, I approach my work trying to be, like I want a sincere, organic experience for the audience. And so thus I also want a sincere and organic experience for me. And so if I position myself to hopefully be affected by the same words that are coming out of my mouth in that moment in which I also hope for other people to be affected by them, if I am like in that space, then that then allows the poem to like move from me just saying there was a wasp nest on the back porch. If as those words start stacking up and start affecting me in a certain way, then they're carrying me to a more theatrical place, but a theatrical place that is like rooted in sincerity as opposed to a performance. So I know that was a very long answer, but I've spent a lot of time like thinking and reflecting on my voice over my lifetime, both with regards to poetry and performance, and also like separate of that. But yeah, so that's that.
No, it's a difficult balance. You're not only in this realm, you're not only a poet who's talking to the reader from a page, you're talking to us through so many different mediums right now. And so you have to use so many different mediums to talk to us. So as people have pointed out, you are not only a poet, you've done illustrations and visual art. How does your creative process vary between the two? And also, do you consider that side of your work, illustration, a form or a type of poetry?
So like they're both connected and also not. I think like all the avenues of creativity that I like to explore, stem from the same spring in me. And it's, they are seeking to be the answer to reveal the question that is unknown to me. And they will reveal themselves in a myriad of ways. That sometimes I'll start a poem and it turns out like it's not a poem. It's supposed to be something else. Or I'll start a drawing, but the drawing is because it has to allow me to unlock the poem. So they're connected, but they also, I think, like, they serve ultimately, I think, different purposes. Not necessarily different purposes, but because like they are absorbed differently, they carry with them different avenues of responsibility. They carry with them different ways in which they exist. Like that. Like I remember, like at the start of the protests, I would, like, after George Floyd was murdered, I would go sit in the garage every morning and sit and try to do work. And the place that I was at that juncture was like, I needed to draw. And it's work that like when I was working on it, I didn't know if it was work to like share with audiences. Mm-hmm. And because like visual aspects of oppression carry with it, I think, a different responsibility than say vocalizing aspects of oppression. And so, that's an example of what I mean of like how they carry different weights of responsibility. And that like, for whatever reason, like over the years, I think that like, the majority of my visual work speaks to a different part of people than say my written work does, and my performance work does. It has always felt that like visually, my work is speaking to trying to ask people to engage more with their imagination. And the written work of mine that is like really connected with folks is work that like asks them to do that, but also like I think like speaks to something that's like a bit more like deeper, with regards to like their own sense of self. So they're connected and they serve one another, but they also like I think do different things.
But all of it, any kind of sharing of artwork is the vulnerability. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with the sharing of your poetry as like the utmost vulnerability?
Two things. One, I think that to be human, that our greatest gift, our greatest tool at our disposal is to be vulnerable. And when I set out to make art, the thing that I found so fascinating was that if I was making art that like ultimately I wanted to be vulnerable and engage with vulnerability, to stand in a space and say things that were personal to me to rooms full of strangers, well, that felt a pretty pretty big exercise in vulnerability, to remove that buffer of distance. And so like, that was like a gift to be able to like, oh, if like I want to be an artist and thus like engage in like the language of vulnerability, well, here we go. You know, this like gets me to the point. But two, you know, I think vulnerability is an interesting thing because it's like, I feel largely, and to generalize, that like, you know, vulnerability can boil down to like two aspects. That like, one, it's important to be vulnerable with oneself, and it's important to be vulnerable with others. And as I've said to folks often, I feel pretty good at being vulnerable with myself, and not so good with being vulnerable with others. And my artist self, my artistic presence, kind of tricks me and tricks others into thinking that I am being vulnerable with others, but I'm not. I'm being vulnerable with myself in front of others. And I think that there's like lots of things that I gain from that. But it also runs the gamut, runs the risk of like me thinking I'm learning one kind of vulnerability, but really I'm just engaging with the other. So those, you know, so there's always like, there's so much room and space for me to learn how to be, have a greater vulnerability with others. But just as a butt into all that, you know, like I think that the wonder and the beauty of like making art and sharing it with others is that it hopefully puts us on a path to like, to self-acceptance. And it puts us on a path to like engaging with others, not from a place of shame, but from a place of just like being human. And that's a thing that like, you know, there just needs to be more of.
All of that is so much easier when you have a community, though. So when you were first starting out as an artist, how did you form your creative community?
For me, I was fortunate because I was in school. I was in an art school in Savannah, Georgia, and it was super small. And the school was small at the time, and the city was small. And so like, everyone around me was an artist who was my age. And it was like small dinky town, not a lot going on. So it also like pushed folks to sort of be like, all right, well, if nothing's going on, we got to make stuff happen ourselves. And so there's always just like creative engagements happening, you know? And so, you know, like I said, I was pretty fortunate and privileged to be in a space that allowed me to build that creative community and have access to those other artists and to just be with them. Because that's not always the case, you know, but like, you know, I think that there's, the important thing is to just sort of like find the spaces and the people. And like, that's always the case, you know, but also like not, I don't know, it can also be really, I think, challenging to conflict like community as like there are just like with poetry, there's like hella therapeutic aspects to writing. There's hella therapeutic aspects to community. But like, you know, I think particularly like in artist communities, there's also very hurt people. And so, you know, that's a whole other rabbit hole, but just sort of like that, like, you know, it's important to find the community that like serves and rewards the work that we are trying to create. But that it's also not like a one-way thing, that we're not engaging with that community simply to get rewarded. Like the way to like build communities to ensure that it's like, you know, a read-write community, you know, like you are reading, and so thus you then are writing in response. And so it just becomes cyclical.
Yeah, it's always important to be reading and exploring and continuing to develop your own work. And we have to turn to other people to do that sometimes. So right now, who are you turning to? What are you reading right now, poetry or otherwise, to inspire you?
Let's see. Right now, I'm reading. I just finished reading. I'm doing a radio conversation with the Oregon Book Award winners of this past year of for fiction and poetry. So read those collection called Spectra and poetry collection Spectra and short story collection called No God Like the Mother. So I've been reading those. I'm reading a new book from the poet Nate Marshall called Finna. I really love Nate's work and been waiting for his new book since his first book came out like 4 or 5 years ago. Ross Gay is a poet that I always go to at any given time. I'm in this Toni Morrison book club right now. We're supposed to be reading Playing in the Dark. It's a collection of her essays, but I haven't gotten a copy of it yet, so I'm not technically starting reading that. And then there's like, I don't know, like the things that I want to read right now are like, there's like a bunch of books at my house that are like the things that I want to read to aid me and stir me with regards to social and racial justice and being present in advocacy and activist causes. And so like I have this book called, what's the name of it? Songs of Hope. I forget. It's a collection of speeches from this person named Subcomandante Marcos, who is like the masked tongue-in-cheek leader, so to speak, of the Zapatistas. There's like a couple of books that I've gotten from this like French anarchist revolutionary sect called the Invisible Committee. So I'm like slowly going through those and have Angela Davis's Our Prisons Obsolete sitting at my bedside that I'm like itching to jump into. And I'm reading, the most things that I read right now are comics. Like it's like I love comics, and so I just love reading them. And then also like particularly right now, it just feels like comfort food. So like I love reading this guy Ed Brubaker who does these crime comics. Yeah, so that's the stuff that I've been reading lately.
So speaking of comfort food, what is the most poetic ice cream flavor?
Ooh, I don't know, but to this date, probably like the ice cream experience that I loved the most. Well, there were two. When I was a kid, me and my friend Jacob took the last of the vanilla ice cream in his fridge. He lived out in the country, and we like got strawberries out of their garden and chopped them up and stirred it in there. And it was wonderful. But in Bellingham, Washington, there's an ice cream joint called Mallard's. And for those of you familiar with Salt and Straw here in Portland, it's kind of like that, but like before that, like they were always like making just like new flavors with whatever was on hand. And one of the flavors they would often have was Earl Grey. And I remember one time that I was there, they had Earl Grey, and I got it as a hot fudge sundae. And it was so flipping good. So fantastic. Like every trip to Bellingham since then, I'd be like, do they have Earl Grey in? And it was like so rare that they would have it in on the trips that I would make it up there. So
yeah. On the train of food, if you really do love biscuits, have you ever been to Blackheart in Portland?
No, and I'm super pissed about it actually, like because it's like super close to my house, and I'd heard that their fried chicken biscuit, I think, is freaking fantastic. And they are no more. They are no more in the age of COVID. So it is a biscuit that will never grace my lips unless one of the chefs explores it elsewhere.
Yes. We have people in the chat who are saying we have to immediately send you biscuits. You never know. You might wake up tomorrow morning and on your stoop is a little care package.
One of my friends, Mike McGee, he's got this poem about mac and cheese. And that's one of his like most known poems. And so there was like this period where folks would like show up at shows, like bringing him mac and cheese.
Wow. Did
Yeah.
that travel well? It doesn't seem like it would.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, I feel that there was probably like local folks that like were able to just sort of like make it and show up at the show with it, and it seemed to do the job.
Yeah. Would you just ship back the crockery? Or they're like, yeah, you just take it. It was my wedding present, but you take it. Like,
You know, I think like from the amount of baked goods that I've mentioned in poems of mine, I have been fortunate to have like baked goods sometimes show up at shows of mine. So, which is nice.
Sounds like a dream. So we're kind of like at the end of it, but fun question. What happens in your dream question and answer? Your dream Q&A?
Don't know. I don't know. I mean, this has been a good Q&A.
Yeah.
You know, like I think the thing that happens in maybe my dream Q&A is more like what doesn't happen, which is like the same questions.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and like I you know, like I legitimately like love any question, and I know like folks are curious about certain things, but it's, you know, it's always really wonderful to get like just like unique questions, so, you know, as opposed to like the familiar ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, get unique questions and get baked goods as like a result of it, of having appeared somewhere. So if anyone else has any last questions, feel free to send them in. We have just one left. It's a good one. What would you say to young people to encourage them to tell their stories?
I would say that you have to, you know, and, you know, for two reasons. And, you know, I'm sure that there's more, but there's two that pop into my head, and, you know, which kind of like go back to that vulnerability conversation that, like, you know, by writing our stories, and not just like writing our stories, but I think by sharing them to others, there are things that we then learn about ourselves. And this world at times makes it very, very difficult for us to learn about ourselves. And it's of the utmost importance to do that. And, you know, two, that like we are all of worth. And so it is, it behooves us as a human family, as a ball of humanity on this globe, to listen and hear the stories of others, and to also have the opportunity to say to others who we are, you know. You know, like you know, one of the things that I love about doing what I do is that like it gives me the space that is mine in a non-egotistical manner, but the space that is mine to say to people, this is who I am. And I think that like all of us want to be seen. All of us want to be heard. All of us want to be known, even if on a small little level. And so, you know, like there's something beautiful that comes from getting to like share with others and to be shared with and to hear the stories of others. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So do that, because it's just needed.
All right, fun one. What is your unrealized big dream project if money and logistical feasibility were not an obstacle?
There are far too many. You know, like I think of like all the ones that I've like forgotten over my life. I mean, when I was younger, it was just like notebooks filled with like art possibilities. But I mean, like right now, it's super exciting. Like as laureate, you know, having funds and resources to do within reason to do certain things. I've been wanting to like make a newspaper, an art newspaper, for a long time, and you know, exploring that possibility of doing that now. You know, like I mean, I want. Oh, there's so many things. You know, like there's a lot of movies I would like to make. Ones that are more or less giant poetry films. Um, but yeah, I don't like. I just I want to make like giant posters, like ginormous posters of image and text. Like if I could do like posters that were just like wheat pasted that took up an entire wall, like a 3, 4, 5-story building. I don't know. Like if someone just was like, all right, here's like all the money you ever need. You know, I'd just be like, all right, let me go like get the biggest space that I can find and just start making anything I wanted to. But yeah, I don't know.
All right, those are some big aspirations. This has been such a wonderful time.
Oh, thank you.
Did you have another poem you wanted to?
Yes, I'll like since we're nearing 8, I'm just gonna do like one short, tiny little poem. That is, over the years, one of my favorite poems of mine. And folks who've heard me before probably heard it many times. But it was birthed out of a friend of mine had posted a photograph on their Facebook. Schnapps, I guess 10 years ago now, of a lemon tree on their kitchen windowsill, and they had written this caption that said, "See the lemon tree I grew from a seed, how big you've gotten." And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. And then I was like, oh, that's so stupid, you know? And I was like, I'm gonna write a poem about a lemon tree. And I think the thing that I really like about this poem is just that it has a very specific birthplace that I know of, and that its birthing was like simply writing about a lemon tree. And it's also a poem that like is like the clearest example and reminder to myself of like, as a poet, as a writer, one is also like the reader. One is one's first reader, and like how one reads one's poems, regardless of how they came to them, change and shape differently over the years. And so like the things that I get from like I as a reader get things from this poem that like weren't things that I wrote into the poem because they hadn't happened yet. And I also like the poem because it, I think, speaks to the things that I love about poetry, which is that it is an opportunity to, like I said, like reveal new mysteries of ourselves. And it's also, I think, pretty. And I think that it's weird. And I think it's humorous. And, you know, so it's just, I feel that it's very much like what that sentiment that I had to my friend's photograph of being both sweet and stupid, you know? So thank y'all so much for sharing your Thursday night with me. Thank you, Paige, for putting this together and hosting me. Props out to the Chutes Public Library and to the good people of Bend, Oregon. Ah, man, it's been so many years since I've gotten to go to Bend. I hope that I have the chance to go before my pointing is up. I look very, very forward to it. So this is Rosie's lemon tree. Thanks, y'all. My beautiful lemon tree I grew from a seed. How big you have gotten. You were so little, when you were a seed. And now, so big. And soon, you will carry such round and lovely lemons, yellow, dimpled. When they grow too big for your thin branches and they leave this kitchen of mine, ask them not to forget it, this kitchen of ours. It is my favorite room in the house. And Lemon Tree, when you pick up to follow, please do think of me. I will think of you. Here, when my tongue is far too sweet and my hands are far too empty, I will think of the quiet poem that was your shape. Lemon Tree. Please, bring a scarf with you. Wherever you end up, it may be cold. And if it isn't, perhaps you will one day vacation to a place where it is. Thanks y'all so much.
There are snaps going out through the city of Bend. There are snaps going out for you everywhere, Anise. This is Thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. These programs happen because you make them happen. We would love to have you join us again sometime. Check us out at shootslibrary.org or come see us in person. We are so very grateful to share this space with Anise Mojgani, the Oregon Poet Laureate. So we hope to see you again soon. A reminder, this recording will be up, so direct people to shootslibrary.org and see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night, everyone.